what's your freedom number? My freedom number is $25 million. Okay, well, how many practices
I can tell you how much EBITDA you need to accomplish that. A group of people would be able to tell you, you probably need this many locations, and there's lots of different math that you can run in terms of how have I engaged doctors, how much of the equity do I still own.
And at Dental Mentors, we're all about building wealth. We don't think there's anything wrong with dreaming big. And I actually think that what I see is more the opposite, where they don't almost have enough ambition because they don't think it's possible for them. They're like, oh, I don't have my MBA, and that's what private equity guys do. That's what fancy business people do. That's what I thought before I got in the industry. Do you think there's some sort of mindset shift, or do you think there are things that they can do to kind of prepare themselves, even to see, do I want to do this or not?
If you're a successful practice owner, then I'm going to think multi-location, growing, associate doctors within your portfolio, it's not just you, then you've already accomplished something pretty unique and entrepreneurial. And you've demonstrated that you're willing to make the bet on yourself. That, for me, is the mindset. Am I willing to make the bet with your own money? I just had a conversation with a doctor, has 4 locations, and just added an orthodontist full-time. That's a big investment for a soul. That's a guy that's going to win.
In today's interview, I sat down with veteran dental executive Mark Lakis. Mark has over 17 years of experience serving as CEO of some of the largest organizations in dental and is credited as the innovator behind many of the dental partnership models we see today. He's scaled dental organizations from early-stage roll-ups to multi-state platforms, executed dozens of acquisitions, and delivered multiple successful exits. Moreover, Mark is just one of the most genuine and kind people that I know, and someone that I'm proud to call a friend. In today's interview, I asked Mark to outline exactly how he would go about growing a practice or DSO in today's market, and to lay out his favorite no-nonsense strategies that he's implemented that he doesn't hear spoken about a lot in the industry. We dive into these topics and more in today's episode. Enjoy. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Dental Mentors. I'm your host, Neil Zemba. Today I'm here with the Mark Lakis. And Mark, I gotta say, before we kick things off here, when I'm looking at your resume, I'm looking at a lot of your accomplishments here. No joke, when I looked at this initially, I thought this was 5 people, but it's you're really you've really done so much in the space, and I'm so grateful to have you here today. We're really going to get into some really interesting topics here, and
that's very kind of you to say. Coming from you, that's an honor.
I appreciate that. Well, to kick things off, I'm just going to list some of these accomplishments off and some things that we have here. I know you started in the industry around 2007. You have run 3 DSOs. You've founded 2 DSOs. You've helped 2 private practice owners turn their companies into DSOs or turn their practices into DSOs. I really want to get into that because that's something that I know a lot of members are curious about, the ways that they can grow. Should I go out and, buy more practices? We just had a call earlier today about, should I expand my operatories out and just basically get more chairs first?
Those are tough questions for practice owners. And yes, 2 of my partners, I did work with them as they had to wrestle with those tough decisions. And we were successful in making them into DSOs, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I really want to get into that because I know that's something that a lot of people are kind of looking for, that algorithm, just kind of that step-by-step framework, so to speak, of how do I grow and how do I kind of think about that process. And I know you have a lot of experience with that.
I would love to talk about it.
You've completed dozens of acquisitions. You've successfully sold 3 companies to private equity. In one case, I know just your investors themselves got a 7x on their investment. I want to talk about that, and I've got some tips and tricks there about how you were able to achieve that outcome. When you were an executive, when you were heading up Southern Dental Alliance, I know that you sort of created what is the foundation of now what we call the sort of partnership model or the founder model. And maybe we should start there. It's kind of high level, but I'd love to just kind of jump right in. And can you talk about
what kind of inspired that?
Sure. I did start in the industry in 2007, and I came into a national platform, a lot of standardization, not necessarily as quality focused. But I then went to a private practice and learned, oh, this is the way care is supposed to be delivered. A lot of that energy came from the founder, the doctor who created it. And as I moved into building and running DSOs, it became pretty clear that keeping that person, whoever that founder was absolutely critical. And not the, here's a contract, you have to work here for 2 years before you leave, a true investment and a partner. So as we did acquisitions with Southern Dental Alliance, we required that the partners roll over 30, 40% and wanted to be part of the company long term. And yet we eventually ended up calling that the founder model. And what I'm most proud of is all of those doctors that were in that founder class. When we sold the company 5 years later, every single one of them stayed and went on to the next evolution of it. And yeah, I've seen that concept be built upon just to how do you retain and motivate and align with doctors.
I think that's fascinating too, because especially in kind of the current, market now, we see from private equity and, there's this kind of notion that, let's get the clinicians almost out of the way. I hate to say it like that, right? But, there's this kind of battle sometimes between
There can be.
Should the clinicians stay? There's sort of a stigma sometimes, from at least what I can see, of, when a clinician stays on as a founder, they'd rather get the sort of MBA type to kind of run the show and kind of get the founders out of the way. I'm very pro-founder. A lot of my friends are folks that are sort of the entrepreneurial dentist. And so I love that you're saying that, and that was something that I was always, fascinated by, the fact that you sort of,
It's not hard to see. It's not hard to see how much better the organization is, how much better it operates when you maintain that energy.
Yeah.
A pure kind of associate model, you don't get that, owner mentality.
Yeah.
And in the DSOs I've been a part of, it's been progressively more, founder oriented. And while that's difficult for a private equity group to manage, but really good private equity groups understand. Our business is those doctors.
Yeah.
We need to keep the best doctors. That's the hardest part of my job as a CEO, is recruiting and retaining great doctors. So that's the logic behind this.
And what would you say, I would assume, and I see it myself as well, like the cultural impact that has to have on an organization. You mentioned as the organization grows, how are you structuring that? So I presume you start off with an organization that's smaller than you'd like it to be eventually. You come in, you start to grow the organization. Are there contractual things that you're doing with that founder? I know you just mentioned kind of some percentages that you like to see when they kind of roll in. What are the expectations that you set with them, and what does that process sort of look like as the group grows?
It has been different in each of the companies I've run. The one I was with the longest, Southern Dental Alliance, that's the best way to at least sketch out. So any private equity group is going to pay you roughly the same thing. And so it's about the structure. And what I like is the aligned incentives part. And some of the components of purchase price are very private equity favorable. An earn-out or a holdback. Those are good motivation tools for the doctor to keep performing in the short term. It's the key for me is how much equity are they willing to roll over? This is the balance between I want to put cash in the bank right now versus I'm willing to bet on the next entity, which is what we're doing together. So when a doctor talks about, I'm not willing to roll over more than 10% or 20%, that's just not the right people.
Right.
So you have to have more conversations to find those doctors that are confident enough in their practices that they think they can drive more value. Unique bird, but yeah, it comes down to, are we aligned financially? What I've used primarily is equity at the total DSO level. It's the most valuable. It's the private equity group doesn't want to give that away because it's the most valuable. But if the doctors are willing to own that, then we are all literally doing the same thing. Let's drive value for when we sell this thing.
Well, and you just said it's a unique bird, and we all hear that a lot. I'm almost wondering, are there character traits, or because I imagine there's probably doctors watching and listening to this right now that they have the ambition of the growth. They know that they want to get big, whether it's for financial reasons or what have you. And at Dental Mentors, we're all about building wealth. We don't think there's anything wrong with dreaming big. And I actually think that what I see is more the opposite, where they don't almost have enough ambition because they don't think it's possible for them. And so I almost wonder if folks are getting caught in this almost trap of I don't think they see enough. They don't have a mentor. Maybe that's a doctor that's done it before, right? So they don't. That's typically what I see. They don't see themselves as that person. They're like, oh, I don't have my MBA, and that's what private equity guys do. That's what fancy business people do. That's what I thought before I got in the industry. Do you think there's some sort of mindset shift, or do you think there are books that they can read or things that they can do to kind of prepare themselves, even to see, do I want to do this or not, right? What does this road actually look like versus, what do I think it looks like? Any guidance that you have for those folks?
I think just in general, if you're a successful practice owner, and I'm going to think multi-location, growing, associate doctors within your portfolio, it's not just you, then you've already accomplished something pretty unique and entrepreneurial. And you've demonstrated that you're willing to make the bet on yourself. Mm-hmm. That, for me, is the mindset. Am I willing to make the bet with your own money? I'll be honest and tell you, I'm personally not. I'm scared of throwing my own money on the table. I just had a conversation with a doctor, has 4 locations, and just added an orthodontist full-time. That's a big investment for a soul. That's a guy that's going to win. So you need to make sure you get things right. But if you've already succeeded, make the right investments. This is self-serving, but one of the investments is management talent. Dentists didn't go to school to be CEOs. I did. And there are people like me. At a certain point, it's worth that investment. Now, also interestingly, there are people like you and your other founders who share their experience and knowledge. Yep. So you can rent this, you bring in a consulting group to help you think about how do you make these decisions. I think the world of both, Matt and Eric. So you've got some great partners, and there are others. So my advice is make the investments, and particularly around advisors.
I love that too, because it's I'm not a dentist myself, of course, and I always joke with dentists. I'm like, yeah, I have the luxury of being out of the chair because I legally can't go in the chair. I can't be in the chair. And there's a lot of folks, like yourself that, what about just, I kind of advise, dentists sometimes too. I'm like, go out, just pitch them. Maybe you can hire them hourly. Maybe you could work with somebody on a contractual basis that's just done these things. One of my favorite things that I feel like I learned in the Silicon Valley sphere was there's this phrase, you can just do things, you can just do things. I think dentists get in this sort of credentialism mindset because they come from such an academic universe. And there's nothing wrong with that. right, there's pros and cons, but I think the con that I always find is like a lot of people are so scared to just talk to people, ask the questions, put yourself out there. The worst that can happen is somebody says no.
That's a really good way to put that. And that is, you have that attitude and mindset. I'm not even sure I do, but founder doctors do. And the people that are going to really drive their own wealth, I think, can make those decisions. Let's make those investments. Let's take the risk.
Yeah.
And there are far more doctors that are not in that class. And I think your platform is likely to help people see that. So let me just reiterate my message that there are wealth management experts, there are tax experts, there are great attorneys. Use them. Pay for them. They're worth it. And the asset protection attorneys, that's important. I didn't know how important that was until I helped my first partner become a member of a DSO and get $40 million.
Yep. That's
a whole different world.
Yep.
So make those investments in the good advisors.
So let's say that, I'm someone who, I'm a doctor, I am at that sort of $2 million mark in production, and I've taken the first steps to scale, and I want to go further. I want to get as big as I can, but sort of conservatively. What are the next steps that you'd recommend that I take?
I know I keep repeating myself around the idea of investment. One thing I think doctors do that hold themselves back is short-term focus. The best example is I've got an office manager that I've kind of thought of as my right hand. I pay her $60,000 or $70,000 a year. Well, you're getting $60,000 or $70,000 a year worth of executive support. Go find yourself the $90,000 or $100,000 a year person. Give yourself some more time to think like only you can as the entrepreneur. Is it right to bring in an associate? Is it best to open a new location? You need somebody to rely on more than you generally have. So that's probably the first step. And then you've got a laundry list of potential growth strategies. If you've got space in your building, you absolutely want to add doctors, whether they be part-time doctors that do other specialties, which I love, or the associate kind of model. Then you get into let's buy or build. And there's plenty of opportunities to buy practices and fix them up. As a DSO, that's not something I like, but as an individual, that can be very financially rewarding.
And when you mentioned that, I'm fascinated by this topic too. Like you mentioned the $90,000, $100,000 employee. What are you looking for? Are you looking for kind of? I always go back to kind of the EOS model, right, of the integrator and the visionary. Are you looking for kind of the yin to your yang, the Batman or the Robin to your Batman, or are you looking for that? Presumably, like they might not have, at least in my experience, they haven't done it quite before. Like maybe that person hasn't managed multiple locations. Is it important to you that they have managed multiple locations, or who's that person?
That would be great.
Okay.
But I'm looking for somebody that I can take an entire piece of my business and just turn it over to them. In general, I really want somebody that I can, make 90%, 80-90% of my decisions. Just bring me the ones that, you really need the tiebreaker. That person tends to have a college degree. That person tends to have
Is it the
10
MBA
years.
type?
Not quite MBA.
Not necessarily.
Then you're getting into the $120,000
Right.
a
That's
year
a good
person.
point. That's a good point.
There
Especially now.
will be a point where you need that.
Yeah.
But you're not there yet.
Yeah.
So, 10 years of experience in some professional capacity, a chunk of which is in dental. If they've run multiple locations, great. Tough to find. So you're probably looking for somebody that has run another large practice.
And how many practices will that nucleus, let's call it, that management nucleus, Is there a production dollar amount? What's the KPI there? Are you trying to get to 4 practices?
Great question.
And then who do you hire?
We've just hired what will become a regional manager.
Okay.
And a regional manager has a span of control that's reasonable. And once you get beyond 6 locations,
Okay.
it's hard for that regional manager to bring on the 7th. So the span of control is pretty.
Is that a
darn
real
big.
number? Six
Yes,
locations?
Absolutely.
Okay.
6 to 8.
Okay.
And it
Okay.
depends on size.
Yeah.
If you've got a $4 million office, no, that person's not managing 6 of those.
Right.
But, $1 million, $2 million
5 to 8 ops
offices,
per location, maybe something like
things
that.
like
Okay.
that. Yeah. So you will have made an investment that you can really scale.
One of my buddies owns a company, and he's basically a fractional CFO. And you just made me think about this, because his rule of thumb is 7. Like seven locations before you should have a dedicated CFO. Would you agree with that? What do you think in terms of like the management of finances? When should you bring on a fractional CFO? When do you need a full-time CFO?
I've been a CFO, so I've got a little bit of a preconceived notion here. Although I've been a CFO, I'm really an operations person. So if your CFO is really an operations person, then making the investment with 7 locations, that's probably a great idea. Might be a little early to just bring on a bean counter, which frankly I don't support in general. So depends on the person, unfortunately.
Should you have a dedicated controller up to
Yes.
that point?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm making the distinction.
Got it.
There's a skill set that the controller has. Please don't try to make your controller your CFO.
I was just thinking about that.
It's not the
Earlier, yeah.
easiest concept
Yeah.
to feel good about, at least, but you're going to outgrow team members. If you're successful in your growth, you're going to outgrow your team members. It's just a fact of life. Embrace that too.
What is your academic difference between a controller and a CFO?
Controller is inward thinking. I can measure what's happening. A CFO is capable of outward thinking.
I love that.
And, what do we need to do together to bring in outside capital or communicate our story to an investment banker? Still knows all that bean counting stuff, but not every controller can be a CFO.
That makes sense. At Rise, we talk a lot about too internal data and external data as well, and kind of the different members of the team that's looking at that data. And I think of like internal data as from when a new patient first comes in all the way through to collections. So basically your case acceptance, existing patients, things like this. And then I think of external data as how all of the data that measures how the practice engages and interacts with the community that it's in. Now, for us, it's a marketing thing, but it's also kind of helps to dictate things like CE, like which treatment should I add? Well, what's the demand of treatment for your market?
Sometimes you talk at an academic level that's a little over my head, so I've got to catch up. But I just caught up. That makes a lot of sense.
Well,
that
the feeling's very mutual, Mark.
That external view.
I mean, literally internal and external, and so it's interesting you say that, because I don't often hear. The reason it made me think of that is I don't often hear people in dentistry talk about internal, external. Everything's internal. Everything is thinking inward, and I tend to believe that kind of. We were just talking about mindset earlier today, and it's just this mindset of. I just think about it as a very defense mindset. They're just looking at stopping bleeding, right? They're the famous kind of, I think dentists
How's my schedule doing? And, what's my production look like next week?
Exactly.
The guy in my seat is thinking 6 months or a year down, sometimes 5 years down the road. Because if you're a DSO and you're owned by a private equity, that's my hold period. I almost don't care what happens next week. All I care about is what's the value when we sell it, or whatever your ultimate goal is.
Yeah.
Which a lot of your target market for this group is looking to sell.
Yeah.
So I'm an external mindset is probably a good change
Yeah.
to try to embrace.
Thinking about that North Star. I mean, that's I love thinking about that as well. Like What's my North Star? You're thinking in such large swaths of time, and maybe that's really, I mean, it's certainly got to be very helpful for ambitious practice owners. Like, start thinking, 2, 3, 4 years out, or to your point, let's reverse engineer the whole thing. I want, and I think with what
Which you can absolutely do.
yeah. Yeah.
Sure. No,
even personal income, right? Like, what's your freedom number? My freedom number is $25 million. Okay. Well, how many practices?
I can tell you how much EBITDA you need to accomplish that. And I can tell, a group of people would be able to tell you, you probably need this many locations. And there's lots of different math that you can run in terms of how have I engaged doctors? How much of the equity do I still own?
Yeah.
Those are big decisions.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you start with this is where I want to get, go get the people that can help you drive. Here's how I get there.
This is something I really want to get into that I talk about privately all the time. I think it's considered a little bit
I'm a little nervous about
controversial.
Right
Well, I don't think it's to me it has to do with the state of the market. Like, for example, I say controversial just because I feel like half the folks I talk to are kind of saying that the dental market is not dying down, M&A activity is not dying down. The other half of the market is kind of like, it's kind of a wet towel right now. Where are you at on that? Because you've been in this space for so long. Investor interest, private equity interest, are people, how do they view dental right now? And can you almost, I would love, like, honestly, selfishly, I would love like a history lesson from you over the past 10, 20 years of like how, when dental roll-ups were somewhat new to like, is it dying down? Can you still get a great multiple? Has the multiple gone up or down over the past 10 years?
Well, that depends on what you're talking about. If
Okay.
you're talking about individual practices, that's one answer. If you're talking about DSOs, it's a very different answer. So DSOs have been through a heck of a hard time in terms of selling or getting the value that they want, and that's more than just, hey, interest rates skyrocketed.
Yeah.
There was a period where, when I was in my early days in the industry, and probably for a good 10 years, people were building companies and with the associated infrastructure.
Yep.
As you get more practices, you need the CFO, you need an internal revenue cycle team. Somewhere in that, just before, just after COVID time, we started to see more people just aggregating. Mm-hmm. Let me just buy a bunch of dental practices. And unfortunately, private equity investors were more than happy to buy that.
Yeah.
Pay a lot for them.
Yeah.
It messed up the whole industry, and we're still recovering from it. So good DSOs that have built a quality infrastructure with great doctors, I think they're going to do extremely well. I'm very bullish on the future, but there's some overhang, and I hope the people that own those will start to recognize I'm not going to get the value that I am hoping for. Now, if you're an individual practice owner, I don't know that hit as hard because you didn't do that, let me try to grow crazy. Mm-hmm. So multiples came down around the interest rate increases, and those are logical. So you can paint a pretty clear picture. If you've got this much EBITDA, this is your multiple. If you've got this much, this is your multiple. I think that'll be the same next year and the year after that.
Was that just kind of a function of like when private equity kind of first discovered, dental roll-ups, they just kind of they weren't maybe as picky about, what they were rolling up, grouping GP? Because I've seen some groups that are, in my view, sort of almost oddly constructed, where like you've got practices that kind of have nothing to do with each other. You've got kind of a smorgasbord of specialties, but I feel like over time I've seen that it's they're more in line with each other. There's a thesis that's more clearly defined.
I've absolutely watched, and frankly, in one case, been a part of a deal that just exploded and didn't work, and others because the business model didn't make sense, which is what you're talking about. There has to be some strategy behind it.
You got it.
Now, the company I just left had a very broad group of specialists. But there was a very good geographic logic. There's a very good synergy logic to it. So there was a business strategy. But if you've got a bunch of GP practices and you happen to buy a couple of pediatric dentists because you could get a good price, that wasn't a good business strategy.
So you're saying that really you need a strong kind of central thesis, and you should honor that thesis and kind of withhold that even if good deals pop up if you're trying to grow. Is that kind of the takeaway there?
Yes, that is the takeaway. I will nuance it a smidge, that it's okay to change your thesis, but it has to make sense. Because I'm always thinking about selling something. I'm talking to a private equity investor in my mind. Can I convey why they should pay for this thing? And yeah, that there has to be a lot of things about it that make sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. And I mean, what's a good example of a great thesis, would you say? What's a good thesis? What's a bad thesis?
Let me throw myself directly under the bus. I did not think that individual specialty roll-ups made sense when they started happening.
Just endo, just ortho.
Well, it started with Smile Doctors, kind of, that, just ortho.
Okay.
I was scratching my head thinking, how is that going to work?
Because you want the GP with you think you want the GP with the ortho to cross refer or something like that?
Just didn't think there was enough meat on the bone, and that there was risk around the patient referral source, and I was dead wrong. Obviously, those single specialty roll-ups have worked out very well. So, very logical business model, executed well in a whole variety of cases. The ones that then, pediatric dentistry fits great with orthodontia and oral surgery. If you've got a periodontal practice in there someplace with a few GPs, I'm not even going to come to the meeting to talk to you about why I should pay for it. That doesn't make any sense. And I do happen to love I've got a lot of GP practices, and I own the specialists around it.
Got it.
So yes, there's a piece of it that's feeding my own specialists, but really what I'm after is the geographic footprint. I control this region.
I love that, and I think that so geographically speaking, this is a topic that I also really find interesting because this is just my own, what I feel like I'm seeing, and I really want your thoughts on this. So I feel like before COVID in particular, a lot of DSOs were just kind of discovering the cloud. A lot of their patient management system would be local to the practice. They weren't on Dentrix Ascend yet, or Curve, or Denticon, or something like that. And then COVID happens, and everybody's sort of forced to move into the cloud for various reasons. A lot of people have to work at home, certainly, and what have you. And I feel like I've seen this trend where, for example, I would never pre-COVID see a DSO that was like New York, Miami, LA, Chicago, or something. But now I'm seeing these DSOs pop up, and let's say it's a brand that's very trendy. It's a very trendy DSO, right? And it's very customer centric, and there's an app, and it's like a sexy interface, right? But they'll have LA, New York, Miami, Chicago, whatever. Now I get why they're in those markets because that's where those people live. But what are your thoughts I always wonder, I never would have seen that pre-COVID because then they're like, you have to be in Atlanta, all your practice, or at least Georgia. And if you're, for our own, DSO, we had these conversations for years. We can't go outside Michigan. And even if we do, we have to be in the Midwest. But now I'm seeing you could have 4 locations now. I'm seeing these with these groups, and it's like one's in a different state.
I wouldn't know how to operate that. Technologically, I understand what you're saying. It is possible. I like being able to share staff. I like being able to have a patient that is normally seen by this doctor, but now goes and sees this doctor, and they have the right information. So the cloud is doing more than just enabling me to work across the country. I have no problem with regions. That if your primary region is Florida, and you then decide, I want to be in Atlanta and I'm going to have 8 practices there, I'm all in. Because you've built your own mini DSO, you can share staff, and you can take advantage of the technologies. But I do absolutely see what you see. There are some really cool DSOs that are building very different kinds of practices. I guess I could see why you'd have them as distant as you do. Maybe that leads into the just discussion of, I wonder what the future model of dentistry is going to be.
Yeah.
I don't think we know what it is yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot more as well about, certain healthcare modalities, traditional healthcare modalities. I talk a lot about HRV, heart rate variability, which is something that, I'm kind of involved with on the medical side.
Right.
But as I understand it, dentists potentially could be running HRV tests for heart rate variability. And also from I really am sort of fascinated by, I have a lot of friends that are DOs, I have a lot of friends that are even more, naturopathic doctors. And they're always really fascinated about dental because there's so many different things in the mouth. They're saying basically oral health is much more related to overall health than the current system speaks to.
I think the science on this is very well founded now.
Mm-hmm.
It's simply a fact. But it's so many different views. And again, how do you get at that? One of the largest DSOs doesn't even consider itself a DSO anymore. It's a healthcare operation. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's the model I would use. Takes a lot of capital. Maybe it's as simple as the doctors only see their patients once a year, or when there's a problem, we see them twice a year. What can we do that will help that patient? Testing has a lot to do with it. We should be able to do some of these things. If you can help diagnose diabetes, you've helped that patient's life. I happen to have a preconceived notion that one of the best things dentists can do to help their patients is treat sleep apnea. And I frankly believe the oral appliance solution for the treatment of sleep apnea is significantly better than the CPAPs. There is an area where you have doctors can make an impact on population health.
Yeah.
I'm a bit on my high horse on that one. I just happen to love it.
No, I think it's fascinating. I know we worked with a mutual group that does that, and I get it, and it makes complete sense, and yeah.
But I'm sorry, the general message is we as dentists, or the dental industry, can and absolutely should play a larger role in the overall healthcare delivery system, and that will improve our whole healthcare system. I don't know how to do it, but that's a great direction for us all to head in.
Well, speaking of improving the system, insurance. Should we accept it? Should we not? Is it a race to the bottom? Should practices be, like, I'll give you an example. Let's say somebody really wants to be fee for service because they see how much they could charge and they see how much they're getting kind of raked over the coals with. Are there KPIs that you look at to determine, how could I determine how to make that decision? Because then that's very tough for a lot of people.
Sure. I think that dentist practice operate effectively, whether you take Medicaid or your pure fee-for-service. It's how you run them. And if you're built on a PPO platform and you decide I don't like insurance anymore and I'm going to become a fee-for-service practice, good luck to you. Mm-hmm. That is not easy.
It's tough.
There's a smaller population. So I'm a fan of insurances. Do I think that some insurances, the largest that I shall remain nameless, aren't the best that you really want to have in your practice, and maybe you make a decision there? Sure. And there's ways to do that. But the idea of, I don't like insurance and therefore I'm not going to take it, is counterproductive.
Yeah.
What I watched was Georgia lowered its Medicaid rates quite significantly, Lots of doctors decided, damn it, I'm not going to take this anymore.
Yeah.
They did nothing but hurt themselves. They just
Yeah.
took a huge chunk of their revenue. And by the way, I was running a DSO that did a lot of Medicaid. I was more than happy to grab those patients.
Yep.
So think about it, and think about it in terms of how much money do I get to take home at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Is this decision going to help me make more money?
Right.
My opinion is generally no.
It's funny. I tend to, ask practices to kind of do like a self-awareness exercise and think about themselves like either a restaurant or a car. I'm like, are you a Kia or are you Rolls Royce? Like, right? Like, where are you? Because if you're going to go full fee for service or like like restaurants, right? Fee for service, it might not quite be Joel Robuchon, but it's definitely like a Ruth's Chris. To your point, you're dealing with a smaller pool, and there's nothing wrong with Olive Garden. Frankly, Olive Garden as a corporation, or even like what would be a middle ground, like Cheesecake Factory, maybe, right? It's like Cheesecake Factory makes a lot of money. Like not everybody wants to be. I think there's 3 Joel Robuchons in the country.
I think you're
like,
making the right point that only so many practices can be successful as a pure fee-for-service practice.
You have to
I've
market
had the pleasure
differently. You have to,
of being associated with several of them. But yeah, no, it's if you're in a Olive Garden market, you should probably be an Olive Garden.
100%. Mark, I know we've talked a lot about it's not what you make, it's what you keep. I know you're very opinionated about this topic. I would love to just hear your high-level thoughts on taxes, hiring the right person, which I know is a big theme of the day. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I come across this both when I'm helping the practice seller, but also when I'm buying a practice. What I'd like everybody to focus on is how much cash do I get to put in the bank? So I don't care what the multiple is. How much cash do I get to put in the bank? And that's much more than just the value of your practice or your company. It's tax planning. There are people that are exceptionally good at very advanced tax planning. You may think you know them and your work. I was very surprised when I found out the kinds of things that can be done. And I'm not talking about let's go do conservation easements. I'm talking about does your advisor talk about how do I buy tax credits? And how do I use a structure of a trust to minimize my asset, maximize my asset protection? It plays into the theme of what you're building here. Just use the right advisors, get the right advice, and keep as much of your money as you can. So, yeah, you're right, I am pretty passionate about this. Part of it's just pure self-serving. It's easier to get the deals done if I can help the doctor keep more of their cash.
Mark, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me.
If you enjoyed today's video, we'd love to invite you to join the Dental Mentors Facebook group. The group is completely free, but it is private and invite only. The group is for practice owners, dentists, specialists, and dental CEOs. If that's you, we'd love to see you inside.
As part of Dental Mentors, you're going to have direct access to the brightest minds in dentistry and the brightest mentors and some of the greatest CEOs that have ever worked in the dental space. You're going to learn all the best practices that you're going to need to optimize the profitability of your practices, to properly scale your practices, and to achieve a high-value exit. You're also going to learn the closely guarded secrets that the rich and wealthy use for asset protection and the access to private investments and investment strategies that will allow you and your family to create generational wealth.
Inside the group, you'll also be able to speak directly with today's guest and all of the guests on the Dental Mentors podcast. You'll be able to ask them questions specific to your practice or group and get the specific answers that you need for that next big breakthrough.
Speaking of exclusive, one of the great things we're going to do at Dental Mentors is our events. In these events, what we've done is bring together the industry's top experts, people that you want to be in a room with. These are very curated, exclusive rooms just for the best of the best and the people inside of the Dental Mentors community. And I promise you, you're not going to want to miss these events.
If you'd like to apply to the group, click the link below and we'll see you inside. And remember, it's completely free to join.